Oh, I see we're gonna get Windowsed.
Fuck Microsoft!
Seriously, Windows? Don't turn off your computer. Don't do as I say. We don't care. Because I'm trying to remove Windows, I don't need to update Windows. Alright. So, what we have today, children, is a laptop of mine I've had for a couple of years. It was actually my daily driver for a short time. When I lost my HP EliteBook, I fell back to this thing. I purchased it off my brother for a really inexpensive price. I think I paid like $75 for it or something like that. This is a Thinkpad T450. And it's a pretty solid piece of kit, to be quite honest. Let me zoom us out here. Anyway, this is a Thinkpad T450. Pretty solid piece of kit. It's, got a few years on it these days, and I know there's tons of mods you can do to these things. I haven't gotten there yet. This is a bone stock, very basic unit. I never managed to have it long enough to upgrade it. And there are reasons behind that. I just like the fact that it's just very original. And I am a proponent of original machines. To a point, I'll upgrade RAM and SSD, but I like to leave them mostly as configured. If I ever actually started using this machine daily, I would replace a few things on it, like it's a non-backlit keyboard. I like backlights. The screen is pretty terrible, even for ThinkPad standards. It's a TN panel. The ever-glorious 1366 by 768 potato. Very, very terrible viewing angles. So you can see here. So you can see here, if I just unplug the charger, you've got one of those Lenovo Square Boys. Or rectangle, I call them Square Boys. Over here, if I just pull it up here, we've got the charge port, USB-A. I believe all the ports in this thing are SS or 3.0 speeds. Mini display port, USB 3, but it's a battery symbol, so it'll actually charge while the laptop's off if you have it enabled in the BIOS. I don't. If we flip it around, go to this side, full-size VGA, nothing today has that for sure, full-size Ethernet, another USB 3 port, I believe this is a SIM card slot, but somebody could correct me in the comments, and a headphone jack. And you've also got one removable battery on the back, another one internally that's removable. So we'll go ahead and fire it up here. And we'll plug it in. Both batteries are in pretty reasonable condition. Give it a moment there. They're in okay to reasonable condition. I wouldn't exactly call it fantastic. So here's a slightly better shot of it. Let me go ahead and get logged in here. So we're logged in, and it doesn't take that long. You can see this panel's just awful, to be quite honest. It's not a bad machine. I can pull up Task Manager here. It does, yeah, you can see my CPU usage is already at 60-70%. Windows just murders this thing. If I sit here and filter it, I'm getting hit by Windows Module Installer, anti-malware service. If you disable all the internet connected stuff on this thing, it runs great. But Edge and automatic updates and Windows Defender and that just murder this poor CPU. There's literally almost no CPU left at this point for anything else. So it is a stock T450, so we've got a Core i5-5300U. This is a 2-core, 4-thread. This is basically what Intel's bread and butter was for about a decade and a half. It is 5th gen, so it's the one beyond Haswell. Runs a bit hotter as a result, but it's not the end of the world. This particular unit came to me with 12 gigs of RAM. I've considered putting more RAM in it, but to be honest, I hardly use this thing a lot these days, and so that's kind of the reasons I wanted to refresh it, to kind of make myself use it again. And I'm trying to get into the mentality of a specific machine for a specific purpose, and that is a good thing. When you have as many as I do, as you'll find out as I do more videos, you kind of need to come up with a reason to have half these things. So we're going to go ahead and move on. It does have a Samsung 850 EVO SSD. I did buy this SSD, so I originally upgraded it from the one it came with to a 1 terabyte. And I was considering putting a terabyte back in it, but the longer I worked and stuff, the less I needed the space. So I downgraded it to a 250 gig SSD, but I bought an 850 EVO. This is a solid SSD. I've had no complaints with its performance. It's just the operating system's problem at this point. And, you know, our Wi-Fi here isn't that great, but I'm getting pretty reasonable performance. So I don't really need to upgrade the Wi-Fi either. And I only have integrated graphics, so I don't have to worry about that either. So you might ask yourself, as I go ahead and can open up File Explorer, because you can see even here, you know, I've only got 160 gigs free, and I have basically nothing installed. I have a few things installed. We were doing some Handbrake and some stuff earlier. We'll get into DVDs and Jellyfin later, but basically this thing, I was using it for our church nearby. Also was using it to keep up with like the Chris Titus Tech's WinUtil, which check it out if you haven't. It's a great utility if you do have to run Windows. I don't need to run Windows anymore. In fact, I barely run Windows. This is like one of the last Windows machines I have. And I've kept it on Windows for this long purely because I was like, well, I need to keep some Windows around. I don't really need that anymore. The only piece of software that I have that requires Windows is Garmin Express. And I haven't used that Garmin in 2 years, so maybe I just don't need to bother. Or I can just launch a VM once in a little while and get the updates I need. So we're going to power it on. And this one, it says to interrupt, press enter. And then I want to go to F1 because I want to get in the BIOS. And we'll see how clearly this comes across here. I might shift. It doesn't look the greatest, but it does exist. Let me, for that full-size VGA experience, yeah, I didn't figure for the BIOS it would probably do anything, but it does exist. But yeah, this is a 2019 BIOS. I haven't had any BIOS updates. I actually just checked for BIOS updates. Secure boot's off. That's important. I usually disable secure boot because fuck Microsoft. And secure boot is just a pain in the butt to deal with. And I'll flip through a few things here. We'll go ahead and leave it in UEFI. That is perfectly fine. We're going to enable the boot option. OS optimized defaults. If you ever get one of these, you should disable that for Linux because it could be an issue. Because it prioritizes UEFI boot and Microsoft secure boot, which we're not going to run Microsoft anymore. So now what we're going to have is a magical little USB drive here. And to do that, I will flip over to my machine over here and go through the process of downloading Linux Mint, for those that don't know. And we're going to put it on this USB drive. And from there, we'll move on. So, now that we got our USB, we're going to need to stick this in the magical USB port. Now, if you have a 3.0 thumb drive, you should put it in a 3.0 port. That's just common sense. If you don't have a 3.0 port and you have a 3.0 thumb drive, it will run at 2.0 speeds. That's pretty self-explanatory. So for this machine, we're going to use Enter. F12 is the boot menu, but I'll just press Enter to get here. 12 some ThinkPads, you have to do it that way. And we want to get to the F12 boot menu. Could be different for your device. Yes, I have installed or at least booted other things on here. I will go into the BIOS later and get rid of these. But for now, we'll scroll down to, this is my drive right here. This is our SSD. This is our USB flash drive. Yeah, and here we'll want to start Linux Mint. Now, if you're like me, and let me zoom in here for you, you've got a few options here. And I apologize if none of this is legible, because my camera is just being a pain. But you got a few options. There's an OEM install for OEM install. And that's nice if you're wanting to give a computer to somebody. You can set it up ahead of time exactly how you want it, and then they can just have a new out-of-box experience like Microsoft Windows. Since I'm using this laptop, I don't care, and so I'm going to set it up for myself. So we're going to go up to Start. Compatibility mode would be if you have certain devices or drivers that require additional, like, oh, I'd say if you had an NVIDIA card, you'd want to boot into compatibility mode so you don't lock up trying to load the open source drivers. That way you can install your drivers. And yeah, we're going to get some ACPI errors. Don't worry about that, it's fine. Like, genuinely. That's not me being a meme, that is actually fine. Your BIOS will always report errors in this case that don't actually matter. So we'll give it a moment here. Okay, so we're booted in. Now it'll be a lot easier for you to not see this display because it's kind of atrocious. So let me go ahead and mirror. I don't know if that's gross or not, but, well, I don't know if it is better, but it's at least easier for you to see. So from here, this is the live environment. Anything you do here is absolutely not going to retain anything. And so what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to install Linux Mint. Now, if you have internet, like I do, I'm going to go ahead and just say, you know, connect to that home internet. That way, if you got an Ethernet, plug the Ethernet in. If you got wireless, put it on wireless. Yeah, I've got a printer. Go away. And we're going to say install Linux Mint. Hopefully, yeah, that looks a lot better for you guys. I said the TN panel on this laptop is just absolutely atrocious. It's one of the biggest complaints I have with this machine is the fact that it has an awful display. It's very hard to see. Okay, so we're going to say continue. And so we're US, so we're going to say continue. You can just type down in here. Nothing you type in here matters. You can also say detect keyboard layout, you know, and it'll tell you press some keys and we'll tell you what you are, which is nice. They do have Apple keyboard and whatnot in here, so even if you're installing on a Mac, you can tell it you have a Mac layout, so on and so forth. Go ahead and hit continue. Multimedia codecs are important. It will go ahead and if you check that box, it'll install those. So you can play your Netflixes and YouTubes and all those websites without any issues whatsoever. So from here, it's going to ask me some questions. They're kind of important. It's going to say erase disk and install Ubuntu. Or install Mint, because Mint's based on Ubuntu. Has Windows Boot Manager on it. Now, oh. So this can happen, and I've seen this before. It says erase disk and install Linux Mint. Sometimes it will let you, sometimes it won't. And we're back. So now that we've rebooted, we should be able to sail through this installer now that Microsoft is deciding not to stop us. So here we are, we're going to say continue, continue. My disk is now blank. I actually off screen went into gparted and said create partition table and then reformatted the disk. You don't have to do that. It should, now the disk's unparked, just format. I just wanted to be sure before I went back through this again. Alright, so the install completed. We're going to say restart now. And yeah, we're going to remove the installation medium. No longer attached. Press enter. And here's our Mint logo. And we're on the login screen. So yeah, that's basically our installation now. I'll go ahead and uncheck this because this is, you should go through the first steps and go through all these things. The important one for outside your network is enabling the firewall. So let me go ahead and just close this out real quick and minimize that. So you got a laptop that runs on battery. By just installing Linux Mint, you're going to notice that you don't get very good battery life. Or your machine will just chew right through that battery. And that's typical, because unlike Windows, Linux doesn't have built-in power management. You have to think of it, it was originally built for server. So even the desktop version, this is built for desktop. Well, this is a laptop, so we need power savings. I have gone back and forth over the years, but I use an app now called Slimbook Battery. It's based on TLP, so at the very least installing TLP will get you some battery life. But if you want a GUI front end that isn't TLP UI, which is complicated, this is a lot easier for a beginner app. And we actually do want the beta version. I've had really good experience here with the beta version that came out back in July. So we'll just go ahead and grab that. And it downloads pretty fast. It's a pretty small package. It's like 600 kilobytes. And you're literally just going to install it. And it's going to say, as a dependency, it's going to install TLP and TLP RDW. That's just TLP, the power management software, and RDW is the radio control for like the Wi-Fi card and Bluetooth. And it's installed. So we'll go ahead and we'll close both those windows. And so you'll have a software piece in here, and you can search for it, called Slimbook Battery. And it's this nice control panel. Typically what I do is I say, go ahead and show me the application on start. I like having it in the system tray. Default to battery operation as far as power management goes, if for whatever reason there's a failure of some kind. You can choose your energy modes here, but you can through the applet as well. Under energy savings, I turn on the power save profiles for power and sound. I turn off the automatic brightness. And I do enable auto suspend USB ports. If you're not using them, why power them on? If you plug a flash drive in, they'll naturally come on anyway. And I do the same thing with the balanced power profile. And you can back up the config file for this when I get into more advanced stuff. For the high performance, I literally just turn off all the power saving features. We don't need any of that. This app will also tell you if you want a cycle alert to remind you to unplug the laptop. You can also see your battery capacity. So I have two batteries in here, and they're Sanyo batteries. This one's at 93%. And so this one's not going to show me the second battery, it looks like, in the app, but I know for a fact the second battery is in a lot worse shape. But there's command line to figure that out. And then, of course, the Slimbook Battery GitHub. Hey, if you want to help them, you know. And so we'll go ahead and say accept. And then this little tray icon will appear down here. And you can choose your power profiles from here or just turn the system off. Normally I just leave it at balanced and just use the device. If I really need to stretch my battery out, I will happily put it in energy savings. And if I'm crunching through like demanding tasks, I'll come down and stick it on maximum performance. Not unlike what you do in Windows 7. Installing software on Linux is really not that difficult. If you download a file called a .deb file or a Debian package, in Mint you just double click. It pulls up a piece of software called JDebi, and all JDebi does is install packages in the GUI for you. I click install, I put in my system password, and that's it. It says, okay, I'll resolve everything for you. And now Discord is now installed. It really is that simple. If you prefer not downloading deb files manually, Mint has a software manager. It's not revolutionary, although Linux did have the App Store before Apple did. Every distribution has its own version of an App Store, so you'll want to take that with a grain of salt. Also works with a package type called Flatpaks. And I'll at some point go over the differences between native packages and Flatpaks, but the only thing you kind of should know is that Flatpaks are containerized apps, so they're put in a sandbox, and they're not let out of the sandbox. And so it's up to the app developer to build these packages, and they're universal. Yeah, they're universal packages. They may not be made by the original app developer, so take that with a grain of salt. But Flatpak on one system is the same as the one on the next one. And this is also normal for a first-time startup. My internet's slow, so it's trying to download the cache and stuff for the software store. That way it doesn't have to do it while I'm searching for software. And there it goes. So let me just full screen this for a moment. So if I wanted to install Skype, I can just click on Skype and go, here you go, here's Skype. If I want something else, you know, per se, like let's say I want to use Photoshop or Steam. Well, Steam's right there on the main page. But I would literally just type, you know, Krita or GIMP. Those are two great alternatives. And here you go. Now you'll see I've got a Flatpak and a Deb package. My thing is install the Deb package unless the Flatpak behooves you. I have this issue with Kdenlive where to use it cross-platform, I need the latest version, which means I need the Flatpak version. So that can happen. But I could click it here and I could just click install and it'll just install the package. It's not a big deal at all. It'll say, oh, yep, you're going to install all these things and you're going to upgrade all these things. Now, I'm not going to install Krita on this machine. I don't really need it. And so, honestly, for this one, that's it. I'll be probably doing some more Linux Mint videos on this thing. I'm kind of happy to have this thing working now. It runs so much better with Mint on it, it's not even funny. And I'm glad you could join me on this little trip. You know, I haven't used this laptop in probably 8 months as a result. And to get to reinstall it and to be able to kind of get to use it again is pretty nice. It's not really what I would call daily driverable anymore, but for basic things around the house, it's got 2 batteries, so I mean it runs a long time. I'll go into a few other things. I install a few other packages myself, but that's not super important from this point forward. So if you like the video, go ahead and like the video. If you want to see some different content on the channel, or if you like the Linux content, I'm hoping to get into some really good shenanigans, but it kind of just depends on what I have time for. So have a good day.